We're in business to save the planet, and we use making clothes to do that. The cure for depression is action. Every one of us has to step up and do what you can according to what your resources are.
That was the voice of Patagonia's Yvonne Chenard, and this is Type 2, a podcast from Looking Sideways, in association with Patagonia that explores the intersection between outdoors, action sports and activism. Now, in each show, I've been meeting people who are using their passion and involvement with the cultures we all love to create change. We've been discussing the issues they're involved with, the change they're seeking to create, the difficulties involved and the rewards that follow. My guest for this episode of Type 2 is the great Hines MBE. Chris is a surfer and activist, best known for being one of the original driving forces behind Surfers Against Sewage. Today he enjoys a reputation as one of the most respected and most successful communicators in British environmentalism. As the founder and original director of SAS, Chris's exploits and successes are legendary. It really is no exaggeration to say that Chris and his colleagues rewrote the rulebook of environmental activism across the UK and beyond, helping SAS achieve amazing success and changing the way such campaigns have been run ever since. Just take a look at a campaign such as Fight for the Bight, for example, which owes much to the trailblazing approach that Chris helped to pioneer. Chris left Surfers Against Sewage in 2010 and set up his Grain of Sand Consultancy, which sees him help organisations such as the Eden Project and the Wave in Bristol achieve their own sustainability and environmental objectives. In short, Chris is a legend, and I was really excited to sit down with him for this conversation. Recorded in March 2020 at his Porthtowan home in deepest, darkest Cornwall in the UK. And I'm very happy to say that the conversation was everything I hoped it would be. Chris is truly inspirational company with an inquisitiveness and openness that I found truly infectious and inspiring, and I hope you do too. Of course, we covered the key milestones of his career and got the backstory of SAS and all their successes. But really this conversation was a chance to get Chris's perspective on our current scenario, both in terms of what he's learned and what his hopes for the future are. It probably goes without saying after that build-up that this conversation is full of absolutely peerless insights for anybody with an interest in campaigning or change-making. But I also personally found it to be a moving and profoundly positive exchange, thanks to Chris's unquenchable optimism and his faith in our collective ability to solve the challenges we face. Qualities we will need, I'm going to suggest, more than ever at the moment. I'll be back at the end, but in the meantime, here's me and Chris Hines. Enjoy. Nice to see you.
You too.
How you doing?
All right, yeah, very good. Yeah, a little bit damp from the rain. I got caught in a bit of a shower.
Yeah,
walking around to see you. So
it's classic kind of in and out, isn't it?
Yeah.
At the minute.
Yeah.
So this is an amazing spot. So is this? You were saying this is where you first lived when you moved down here?
Well,
so
first lived in
this site. Like,
yeah, I did spend 6 months living in a van.
Right.
Because the job I got, I moved down to work for a surfing magazine. It was the first UK surfing magazine to get national distribution.
Which one was that?
It was called Surf Scene.
Okay.
So it was the first one to get national distribution through the John Menzies and W.H. Smith.
Well, there you go.
So it made that jump from being 2,000-3,000 circulation to over 10.
Yeah. It's like what, early 80s maybe?
Yeah, early 80s. But I basically was getting paid £40 a week.
Right.
As assistant editor.
Wow.
Which was like learning a skill. I learned how to take a magazine to print, but the job only paid that, and that wasn't enough to have somewhere to live and a vehicle.
Right.
So you had to have a vehicle. So did the first 6 months living in a van, yeah, and then rented the upstairs flat of this house, and then lived in a caravan for 7 years, right where we're sitting now.
Wow.
So,
amazing.
yeah.
And when did you buy this place then?
In 2000, it was offered to me by my landladies, my old landlady Vera. Her son Rodney came and saw me and said, "Do you want to buy Vera's?" And yeah.
And then you've put this extension in, which is like really beautiful. So it must be lovely to like have that synchronicity of like having spent all this time here and then finally kind of completed the circle, you know, to have it how you obviously really wanted it.
Yeah, and if you look over there on that kind of the old photograph on the right there on the hill.
Oh yeah.
So the middle building is the cottage here, But the massive, great copper crushing engine, which is like a 3-story building, is again right where we are.
Wow.
So this is an old industrial site, and if this is basically a mining slag heap. So
Really? From tin mining?
this is a copper mine.
Right.
Yeah, but if you stand up here and look straight above your head,
Yeah.
so if you literally stand up and then look out that window, you see the chimney up out of this one here?
Oh, yeah.
So that is that's the exhaust chimney to the copper crushing engine.
Right. And and how long would that have been in?
1860 it was working.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when I first lived here, there was almost nothing here. So this oak tree next to me.
I see it now.
Yeah,
I see what you're talking about.
Yeah, but this oak tree here, this one just out the window,
Yeah.
like I put that in as a whip when I
Right.
lived in the caravan.
Right.
And all these trees here are all, like, quite a few of them, I planted, and it's nice to be regenerated. There's not much soil here, though.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
lovely. No, it's a great spot.
So we worked out that we actually have met before about a year ago, surfing Porthtowan on about as cold a day as I've ever surfed. It was absolutely freezing. Well, it was frozen, wasn't it? that day?
No, it was. There was ice on the beach, which
Yeah.
for here is quite rare
Yeah.
in Cornwall. You don't often get that in Cornwall, but it was really cold.
It was a really beautiful morning though, wasn't it? Because super offshore, so you had that kind of iridescence off the back of the waves, and then like the stream was like steaming, wasn't it?
Because the steam was a lot warmer than the air, so that you had that steaming effect with the sunrise coming down the valley. Yeah, it was very, very lovely, beautiful morning.
But you've not had a vintage winter, have you, this year, really?
It was good. December, I surfed loads. Yeah, I think I had like 10, 12 surfs in December, and January was pretty good, and then it's just gone. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Pretty onshore.
February's just been onshore, storm.
Yeah. So what are you filling your days with at the minute?
Lots of work.
Yeah.
So
is this through Grain of Sand? That's your consultancy, right?
Yeah. So a grain of sand, that's kind of it's me basically.
Yeah.
Although it's open if I want to work with anybody else, because I kind of there was a moment where I was running as Chris Hines, but that feels to me like I don't particularly like to be that front.
Right.
I like to be, it's and why should someone else come and work for Chris Hines,
right?
Associates or whatever it is.
Sure.
To me, it feels nicer to have a label that if I want to collaborate with people, I can, and it's under a name.
Yeah.
That they can also have a share in that. So that's what that is. It's about driving positive change
and using your experiences that you've accrued, obviously, over 30 years, I guess, in this space to help other companies. Is that kind of how it works?
It's companies and to inspire individuals. Inspiring individuals and organisations to change. And I work with 2-3 now on kind of a retainer basis. And sometimes I'm that kind of person who provokes them. I'll challenge people. I'll never back down from anything. If I think it needs saying, I'll say it.
Yeah.
And then lots of bits of quite a bit of public speaking.
Yeah.
At varying levels. So all that kind of stuff, and like some examples, like this time last weekend, I was just on my way back from Northern Ireland, where I'd been out working on a intercultural community resilience type project.
Okay.
EU funding under a title called Peace 4, but working with a company called Beyond Skin, and Darren, amazing guy out there, and that's what he does. He uses music quite a lot to kind of stimulate those changes and links between people who wouldn't normally talk.
Right.
So how do you get people to talk? And again, activism and environment and our community again bring people together who might not normally come together. So I did 2 talks out in Northern Ireland, and also had a whole education myself when I was out there.
Right. In what way?
Well, Darren took me to the so-called Peace Wall in Belfast, and it still separates the Protestant and Catholic communities in the Falls Road and Shank Hill area. And, there's all these murals, a lot of them about peace and some great environment ones. But then there's some gates, and those gates are still locked.
Right, so
every
still
night at 6:00.
on sectarian grounds,
Yeah,
essentially.
on sectarian grounds.
Right.
And I think it's all too easy for, I don't think we know that on mainland UK quite the level that still exists.
I think there's the assumption that since the Good Friday Agreement, it's just all solved, isn't
Yeah.
it? But like even in Derry, there was the murder of the journalists. I think last year, wasn't there? And
Yeah.
obviously it's still a huge issue. So,
Yeah. But I mean, obviously, they have moved on a lot.
Yeah.
But it's and Belfast, thriving city. It was great. Good vibe. Met some lovely people. Also went to a National Trust property, Mount Stewart, and talked to them. Learnt how they're adapting and for climate change, because it's just coming in to some of their big properties. And then the National Trust. There was a great guy, he's a bit of a visionary who worked
Right.
for the National Trust called Rob Jarman, and many years ago he kind of started this process for them. Probably 20 years ago now. He was pushing that agenda. Then they have this kind of managed withdrawal, shrinking shores policy.
Okay.
That they won't fight nature. They can't keep the sea at bay.
Right.
They'll slowly manage their withdrawal.
So over issues like coastal erosion.
Yeah.
And, right. So
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So rather than try and hang on for dear life, it's just like accepting that natural status quo and working out how they can adapt to it.
Yeah.
That is pretty visionary.
Yeah.
So that was one individual that sort of had the idea for that.
Yeah, and he kind of led that, and he's no longer with them. He's working on other projects now, but yeah, Rob Jarman, he was a great guy.
So you mentioned that you're working for, different organisations and companies. Given your long, breadth of experience, have you seen a change in the reasons that people are coming to you for advice and the service that you offer?
I'd say, I don't know that there's a change in the reason. I'd say there's more of them.
So perhaps because the landscapes have changed.
Yeah. So I think it's changed. I think everybody's now, if anybody's not awake to the fact that we're in pretty serious situation, then they've got to be, sleepwalking.
Yeah.
And, existing with completely closed sensory input.
Yeah.
Because from the weather that we experience to all of our news, we're in a fairly dark place. Although I'm positive, I'm optimistic about our ability to come out of it.
Yeah.
That is something I do hold. I think we can change. But yeah, more and more people are saying, okay, what do we do? So how do we do this? And what's the process? And a lot of that is around communications.
Okay. Outward communication.
And internal.
Okay.
So some people will get it within a company. So last year, for example, I did a talk for a company, 10.2 billion turnover,
Just
oil
that.
and gas sector.
Yeah.
And there were 10 people, and they'd come for a 2-day away session. And this was the group of people who environment sat within their remit.
Right.
And they'd come for a 2-day away session. They went to Eden Project in the morning, and then in the afternoon, my brief was to spend the afternoon with them being extremely provocative.
Right.
And
How do you do that then? Give me an insight into
I'll
that
do
might
a
look
talk.
like.
So I that afternoon, I probably spoke for an hour and a half, and then we debated.
Right.
Now, within that 10 people, there are some people who, there's obviously the person who invited me and made me part of their agenda.
Yeah.
So some people had already moved in terms of this decision-making body, and then there were others who were more resistant to it.
Right.
Now, that company already is 25% solar.
Sure.
So
they feel like they're already
they're
active.
already moving that way. But the kind of question is, in another 5 years' time or in another 10 years' time, will they be completely moved away from all oil and gas and non-renewables? And I think they probably will. And I think there were people within that room who were saying that was the game they needed to move to.
Right.
So that's kind of one example of people who would want that stimulation. Then there's other organisations. So there's a construction sector company I work with, Ward Williams Associates, and I've been with them, crikey, it's probably 7-8 years now, I would think. And and they pay me a retainer. Sometimes they use me a whole lot, and other times they'll just keep paying me that retainer even if they're not tapping into me.
Right.
But that agenda within their organisation is a lot stronger, and it's gaining steam all the time. And partly as well, they're going out and challenging their clients. When some of their clients come to them,
Right.
they're saying, well, if we're going to take up this project on and we're going to do the your project management and your quantity surveying and all those things and the cost management, as the client, where are you building sustainability into your thinking?
Right.
So that's kind of forward thinking, and trying to persuade those clients, everybody who comes, that they've all got to be thinking about this, because we do. Yeah. It needs to be everywhere.
So your job is in effect to kind of help them create internal robustness to the idea that they want to, if they want to explore this territory.
Yeah, and encouraging them to do so. I guess a little bit of a challenge if there's something that maybe isn't right. A debating forum. I was in with Andy Snapes, the boss, last week, and I've known Andy since I was 19 when I first moved down here. He was one of the local kind of surf crew. And he was going, oh, check this for a dilemma out. And we were kind of running through this dilemma between the social, environmental and financial aspects, the triple bottom line thinking of a major client. And it was clearly wrong. So we were going, well, how do we change that? What's the proper pathway? And sometimes there's that kind of realism. So this client seemed to be getting stuck on the fact they couldn't do anything,
right?
Or they couldn't make that balance work. So therefore, they weren't going to do anything. Well, doing nothing isn't acceptable.
Sure.
So
you help them kind of unblock, if you like.
Yeah, unblock and unlock, and then how do you communicate that?
So that's what I was going to say. And then the next step must be, like I mentioned, like the outward communication. And how do you? Yeah, because obviously that's a huge area of difficulty for those companies to do it with credibility, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, and some of there's kind of B Corps is a very interesting area.
Sure. Something you hear a lot about these days.
And that B Corps, that this kind of change, that your primary aim isn't necessarily to make money.
Yeah.
Money is a tool. Money's there to do good things. And again, I'm working, Rodder's Creamery have just engaged me.
Nice local connection.
Yeah, it's about 2 miles up the road, which is great.
All the cream
That's
teas.
my closest client. Yeah, I have to be very careful health-wise here.
Sure, yeah.
Not always to come back with clotted cream.
Yeah.
Although my great niece is really intrigued by quite how much clotted cream there is up there.
Yeah, I bet. Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, they're a 130-year-old company. When you look, they're already doing a lot of good things.
Yeah.
And it's how do they structure that? How do they formulate that? But absolutely, they're people, and it's the dairy sector, so they got challenges coming at them. But there's a lot of kind of some truths and some pragmatism of getting through.
Yeah.
Like at the moment, a lot of people want to buy bottled milk, and they think they're doing the right thing.
As in, like, go back to the old, like, get it delivered, and
But you need to be careful. You need to find out where the nearest bottling plant is.
Yeah.
Because we don't have one in Cornwall. There isn't a bottling plant in Devon. I don't think there's one in Somerset or Dorset.
Yeah.
So what's the carbon footprint then?
Suddenly it's a lot of miles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was a beauty years ago, Ginster's Pasties in they're kind of caught with this thing at the Tesco's that existed right next to them. The pasties were going all the way up to kind of a distribution centre up near London, then coming all the way back down.
Right.
Rather than someone just knocking on the door and going, "Can we have like 24 pasties, please?" So, and sometimes it's there's some madnesses in the world.
Yeah. So you try to kind of help people recognize those pitfalls. I mean, a lot of it's probably like just common sense, understanding, how to avoid them as well, right?
Well, and just asking the questions.
Yeah.
Just going, anybody got any bright ideas here? What are we actually doing? When we were at Eden, when I first went to the Eden Project, so I was sustainability director at Eden Project for about 5.5 years.
Was that from the beginning of that?
Just after.
Project?
I went in about a year after they opened, or 6 months after they opened. But when I got there, they had no waste management facilities at all. Wow. Every single, cup, plates, knife, fork, everything was all single use, straight to landfill.
Wow.
And my first job was to go in and sort out their waste management system.
Yeah, do that low hanging kind of thing.
And again, when we first started looking at the waste, so we went through every single bit of waste that arrived on site, either kind of coming in from suppliers, and then 1 week we did every bin line out of every bin, and we sorted through what was compostable, what was recyclable, and what was a problem, and then went up the supply chain and changed that. And there was one moment where all the pasties were being delivered, and this is when Eden were doing 1.9 million visitors a year.
Right.
So they were doing a lot of pasties. They were selling a lot of pasties. And the pasties were all coming in cardboard boxes.
Right.
And we said, well, why? And the pasty company said, well, we thought you wanted them. And we went, no, we don't. Can they come in, reusable baker's trays, plastic baker's trays? And they went, oh, brilliant. They saved themselves, I think it was something like £30,000 just on the rental of the storage unit to store the cardboard boxes in.
Wow. Okay.
So there's all this stuff, but if we'd never started that thing of having a look at what we had, we'd never have found that out.
Yeah.
And they were delighted.
So, and then so you're there for like 5.5, 6 years. So then once you kind of work that essentially like fairly basic stuff, you can kind of start looking at more ambitious projects. Is that how it would work with somebody like the Eden project?
Well, what we then did was you get the immediate low hanging fruit off that bit, but then we built in a system. So we put in segregated bins right through the site, established a waste neutral team, because when I got there, it was me. I was doing the waste, creating the waste system and strategy, but also on the Friday afternoon I'd go out and put my dirty jeans on and sift through the recycling, and I had 3 bits of Harris fence and a lock-up container.
Right.
So I was doing kind of both, but I'm quite used to early days of SAS. I was very much, that was again incredibly hands-on. So then we built the system, and we got a food composter, so all of the putrescible waste all went into there. There was a brilliant bit of triple bottom line thinking. So we looked at the environmental, social and financial impacts of, do we stick with single-use disposables, or do we put in a dishwasher and, proper plates and cutlery? And environmentally, we reduced our landfill by about 7-8 tons a year.
Right.
We reduced the carbon and the material footprint of manufacture and transportation to us. Socially, we created 2 jobs because people had to load and unload the dishwasher.
Yeah.
People got a nicer cup of tea. Because
which is important.
And then we didn't see it coming, but people also started buying more salad, because you could put salad next to, whereas on a floppy cardboard plate, you couldn't put salad on.
Right.
So that was the social uplift. And then financially, we sold more tea, we sold more salad, and we saved ourselves 159,000 over 5 years.
I mean, it's really interesting. So basically, on the business level, the social level, you start to see the impact these changes have, as well as on an environmental level. So, yeah.
So that's that triple bottom line thinking. Yeah. And again, you probably don't, if everybody did a little bit of that on every decision they made.
Yeah. Because often you only hear about like one of those factors, don't you, in the debate, really?
Yeah, but it's a balance.
Yeah, especially when you kind of, currently, there's a lot of onus on the consumer to change their behaviour, to make these changes. And yeah, it's interesting hearing this 3-dimensional picture that you're outlining about what's actually necessary, really.
And you won't win on all of them.
Yeah.
But even on a kind of basic level, if you just start to think about those 3 principles, it leads you into good places.
Yeah.
And again, that's that kind of B Corps a version of that, but that also takes in kind of workers, but that's part of the social element, and your community, which is part of the social element, and then your environment and your governance, and that's the roadmap for B Corps. So it's companies and consumers all thinking about these things. And I was in Geneva doing a talk at a UN Youth Summit back in November, and often this kind of question comes up of what can people do, and I did a calculation that if those 200 students in the room were all UK students, and they'll be paying £7,000 a year tuition fees, £9,000 a year, then that's £27,000 that each one of them has.
Yeah.
So you do the sums, and I think there was over £5 million worth of money that they could choose where they spent that.
Yeah.
Now, all universities have an option to apply for green gown status and green gown awards. That is a specific measure for universities. So if they're going to go and it's not that they necessarily make that final decision, because they need to get a good education. They need to be able to pursue what it is that they do.
Yeah.
But they should be asking the university, where do you source your energy? What's your waste management? I've got £27,000 here that I'm going to spend with one of you universities. Who should I spend it with?
Yeah, right. So getting people to think on that level of their consumer power, even in a decision like that, which is probably, again, isn't something people really, I don't think, factor in that effectively. It's more seen as like a very much single issue thing, isn't it? Like how you can make that change personally.
Yeah. And that is, like if people realise, the 30,000 people who marched in Bristol to sit with Greta on Friday, with Greta Thunberg, that's a massive thing. A lot of those are students.
Yeah. With a lot of power.
With a lot of power.
Yeah.
And a lot of power not only through their campaigning, but actually through real action.
Yeah.
Real financial action. And the universities won't want that question coming out.
No.
And that's one of the things around campaigning, is they don't want you to ask that question.
Yeah.
But that should be a norm, an absolute norm.
Yeah.
It's like, again, I do work with the Wave in Bristol.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because they brought you in right at the start of the project.
Yeah, way back. Yeah.
So from that was a ground up, like, how can we? Yeah. And obviously there's a lot of ethical questions with those kind of developments. Yeah.
But the biggest fundamental one is, where does your energy come from?
Well, that's what I mean. I don't mean that. And
it's 100%.
I don't mean that our wave pool's good. I mean that, like,
but it's that fundamental one, and you can't say, anybody who's driving a wave pool anywhere in the world that isn't sourcing that energy from 100% renewable, either through the wire or them preferably trying to build their own on site, what the hell do they think they're doing?
Yeah.
Because carbon-based fuels are causing acidification of the oceans, which destroy reefs and people's livelihoods, and sea level rise, and destroying communities. But even if you're just a self-centered surfer, you're destroying the reefs that you want to go and surf on, either through the reef being dissolved or through sea level rise and it not breaking properly anymore.
Yeah.
So if you can't see that, you're fundamentally a bit dumb. I hate to say it. I hate to be a bit brutal.
But it's important to say it, because again, you're encouraged not to make those connections. I've never once really seen in that whole, the debate, if there's any debate about the ethics of wave pools, is like, what do they do to surf culture? It's not about like, you can find things about the environmental impact and whether what you just outlined, but it's not exactly like the headline part of the debate, is it?
And I think the whole of surfing's in many, even like surf tourism is quite like that as well.
Completely, no one questions it. No. It's just like, we won't worry about that because I recycle my single-use plastic.
Yeah, but we fly everywhere, off we go, and we don't think. And I mean, that's there's part of the wave pool debate is that you don't have to fly every time.
Yeah,
and I think the era of everybody, this thing of I'm just going to go and chase a swell for 2 days and drop everything and damn my carbon footprint. Well, that's not leading. And that's, maybe we need to change that. Well, I don't think maybe. I think there needs to be a change. And this stuff we've been talking about this for a long time.
Sure.
Way back in, I think it was early 2000s, which is 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
When the kind of link between climate change and travel came up, the owners of Rough Guide and Lonely Planet, clearly in the kind of like firing line, came up with a brilliant joint statement: travel less, stay longer.
Yeah.
So, really value your holiday. Do go and stay and be part of that kind of culture and give something to it.
Can you reconcile those two, as a traveling surfer? Is there a way of reconciling it? Because, the hypocrisy, the guilt thing. It's such a common trope in this argument. Like, and it's, to be honest, it's something I ask everybody that comes on this show. Like, how can you reconcile that? Can you do both? Can you be a responsible surfer and travel? Is that possible?
I think you need to minimize it, and I think you need to. People aren't going to move that whole way immediately. Offsetting is what you should do when you've tried to reduce as much as you can. So, but what you shouldn't do, so offsetting is not just an excuse to be able to continue exactly as you are, taking all those, 6 surf trips a year and some of them for a 2-day swell or whatever, or what it is, and then I offset it so everything's okay. That's not. So reduce it and start and keep reducing it. And we will need to change our work patterns long term.
Yeah.
And that's a big societal shift that we, if what we want to do is to go take a month out, then we need to change that very working relationship with some of the companies. And that isn't going to happen with our employers. That's not going to happen immediately. But all people will be thinking about this, not just surfers. So, that ability to go for a month, that might mean that there's changes in the whole way that companies run. That isn't going to happen immediately. That'll probably take 10, 15, 20 years for those changes in our working lives and how we function to change. And one of the big things about this kind of, we've only got 10 years. We have only got 10 years to make some drastic changes. But people shouldn't get hung up on that change has to happen immediately right now.
Yeah.
What has to happen in 10 years' time is that we have changed quite a lot. So, and again, you come back to flights. Caroline Lucas, she's your MP.
Green
possibly.
MP.
Yeah. She was asked this question. She said, everybody should be able to have one flight a year.
Yeah.
To go and see family or have a holiday, and be aware of that and probably offset that. Then tax the second one. And then flight 2, start really taxing it. Flight 3, and increasingly rank up of increased levels of tax on your flights. Because, again, it's only the uber rich who really afford to do more than 2-3 flights a year anyway. And so that's that kind of way of going forwards. And we need to be working our way quickly over the next 10 years. It's not long. We're down to, take out weekends, so 3,650 days. Well, take out weekends, you're down to 2,600. Take out the 2 months already gone, and this is chipping away. That's it. That's almost like, jeepers, I've got a bucket list before I die.
Well, it's tomorrow, isn't it? You just you just said the year 2000 was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Don't feel like it.
Yeah.
It feels like it was yesterday.
And and that pace is staggering.
Yeah. So how do you stay positive? Because you started off by saying you feel positive, but then what we're talking about, and with I'm actually quite surprised to hear that in a way, because given your breadth of experience and given the work that you've done and given the shift that you've seen, presumably in the way that this whole conversation is dealt with, as back in the day it was a very countercultural thing, wasn't it, really? When you started with Surfers Against Sewage, it wasn't a mainstream conversation, but it has moved, which is a very positive thing, obviously, but equally the progress hasn't really been made. So how do you stay positive in the face of that?
No, it's way worse. I think there's a statistic that says more carbon's been emitted since the Kyoto Protocol than was ever emitted before.
Wow.
So, you'd have to check that one, but yeah. I've heard that one. It's staggeringly scary. But we have the ability as a species to do this. We can make amazing things. There's a research unit in Bristol University that just released something a few weeks ago that they can lock up little tiny bits of radioactive waste within a man-made diamond, so the hardest material you can get, and that battery would last for 5,000 years. So you'd never need to recharge your phone, ever. All this electric equipment here that we're looking at and making this, done.
Yeah.
So those technologies, that's just one thing. And there's, frustrating for the UK madly. We have the best wind in terms of other than Ireland, probably in the whole of Europe, we have a company called Rolls-Royce who make the best turbines in the world. They're used to make weapons.
Yeah.
So why don't we see Rolls-Royce, the manufacturer of some of the best turbines in the world, make wind turbines and make ocean turbines and make, those things can be done.
What do you think it will take though? Because obviously
leadership and consumer and population demand.
Yeah, exactly though. But what's going to drive that? Because what you're talking about, that that technological advancement does come from the military industrial sort of complex right now, doesn't it? And is essentially what the whole system is rigged around, if you like, or organized around. So that's just kind of the fact of life as it is now. So that shift to what you're talking about is huge, it feels like. So and of course it'll take leadership and a groundswell of public opinion, but do you think it's going to take everybody understanding the severity of the situation for it to get there?
Yeah, and stuff may get worse. There's a great book that I would encourage everybody to go and have a look at. Jonathan Porritt is one of kind of Britain's longest serving and best ever environmentalists. And he wrote a book called The World We Made, and it's set in the year 2050. And in it, it's in the character of a school teacher called Alex Mackay. And he's looking back and he's saying, we have largely made it. There's been some real tough bits along the way, including the World Food Riots of 2023, when tens of thousands of people died on the streets of
the coronavirus,
capital city. Exactly, all those things. New Orleans has finally been abandoned to sea level. But then he says there's still some stuff to do, but largely we've made it.
Right.
And being Jonathan, there's there's blueprints for our food systems, our health care, our finance, our governance, our politics, our everything. And being Jonathan and the work that he does with the Forum for the Future team, everything is referenced. Everything is a possibility if it is funded.
Yeah.
And given the leadership. Now, the funding, again, the European Investment Bank has said it's not going to, it's stopping all investment in fossil-based fuels.
Yeah.
That's a big change. There will be a prosecution, just as there will be a prosecution for ecocide at some time in our lives. Someone somewhere will be prosecuted for destruction of natural environment knowingly. Now, that used to be, people would have said before, 2050, nobody will ever be done for genocide. But they were.
Yeah, true.
And there is the challenge for that as law. The Mark Carney, the retiring bank who's the chairman of the Bank of England, the governor of the Bank of England, he made all the 6 big banks who run the UK do a pressure test last year on their how robust they were, where the risks were associated with climate change. There is a call that all listed companies will have a legal obligation that will sit at board level, responsibility, to be measuring and taking positive action. Now, that will then carry with it the potential of fines and or a jail sentence. That used to be the situation with corporate manslaughter. That never did sit at board level. So when you look at when they used to build things like the tube tunnels underneath London, they used to kill a person a mile.
Yeah.
Now, Crossrail is saying the target is 0 deaths. And that's because the responsibility comes up. There's a legal responsibility.
Yeah.
So that infrastructure of what's changing is those things. So there are political drivers, there's legal drivers coming in on all of that, and the financial systems are getting their heads around it. And the other thing that happens when they run that test at that level for all those banks is they saw all the risks, but wherever there's a risk, there's a chance for them also to go, okay, so there needs to be a solution delivered to that. And the first people to get to those solutions will be the people who end up running the companies that make us fit to live in the 21st century.
I mean, your optimism is, it's great to hear. Just because when you look at the kind of bellwether examples now, even like Scott Morrison and the fires, and the reaction to that. Like, it's not exactly like, that whole debate. Like, it's just depressing, isn't it? It's just a bit like, what more? What do you need? Your country's on fire. Like what? And they're just still steadfastly refusing to make a link, aren't they? So I guess if I'm coming across a little
no, but provocative, good, challenging. Well, so I think I had a conversation probably 5-6 years ago with my sister, and she was going, "Oh my goodness, it's going a bit pear-shaped, isn't it?" And I said I'd rather it went really pear-shaped as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and
because the sooner we get to the rock bottom, and I hadn't thought that it would take as long. I didn't think we'd see some things.
Yeah,
I never thought that we'd come out of Europe, but we have, and we that is where we're going. But that's all part of it, and we've got to kind of come out of there.
Well, this feels like on that case.
But ScoMo, just for for the if he was put up for re-election now, would he get in?
Yeah, maybe, probably not. You would think.
No.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like these are movements of history, doesn't it? That we're talking about, and that's what you're talking about. Yeah, that's what you're talking about. Basically, you're talking about this is the generational societal change that is going to be required on that global level, really. I mean, that's brilliant to hear that, because that's why I asked the question, because I was surprised to hear you set your stall out at the start. Say, "Oh, I'm positive."
Scared shitless.
Yeah, but can see the light.
Yeah, and I think because we have to tell, we get beaten up by, we got two choices when stuff comes at you. You either get up and have a go, or you crawl into a hole and just think that you can't make a difference. And I'm lucky enough to have been able to be part of a campaign that made a massive difference to the coastal waters around the UK. So I kind of know that can happen.
It can work. And I mean, let's be honest, that wasn't the most promising at the start. You mustn't have, in your wildest dreams, been able to think what you would have achieved with that, from how it started. So
not at all. And we were that naive that we, when we first started charging £2 membership, we thought we might be able to save up and buy a sewage treatment works. And then within a few weeks, we kind of realised they were several million. So that wasn't going to happen. I forgot to say as well, so Surfers Against Sewage started in the caravan. So the first office was in the caravan outside the other house up the other end there. Yeah.
So how do you feel about that now, that organisation? You must be so proud.
Yeah, 100%. Amazing. Yeah. Look, there we go. The hairs on my arms have just stood up. Brilliant. Yeah.
And what's the
Love
one?
it. And I pay my membership as well. Everybody should pay their membership. I've always paid it. Even when I was working there, I would still pay my dues, and I always do, and I will until the day I die.
If you can boil it down, what's the one thing that you learned from that experience that you can take into the subsequent things that you've worked on?
That through sheer bloody mindedness and help from an awful lot of people, and being light of foot, you can win. We can do this. That's the message, and that's what I go and that's what I talk to people about. I was with I'd spent all day in a school in St Albans this week. I did an assembly to 150 sixth formers and year 8s or 9, I can't remember, but and then a workshop, but the message was you can do something. And there was a bit in there where at one point these 4 girls, and I challenged them. I said, run a mini campaign. So all the sixth form had to come up with mini campaigns that they created in half an hour and then present them. And these girls ended up with a thing called Love Yours. And Love Yours was this campaign to say, you don't need a new phone. You don't need a new car and a bigger and a better. Love what you've got. Love yours. And because chasing all of those consumerist dreams doesn't make you happy. And it was just amazing they boiled it down and they loved it. And they loved their things, their possessions. And it's the same within our sport. Oh my goodness, I had a surfboard, my first surfboard. My first and second. I used to go to school, save all my dinner money, come home, eat the mother out of all the bread that was there. And I used to, creosote all the fences, mow the lawn, do anything. And I love those boards. And I still, if I get a surfboard, I still love my board. And I was in the water last summer, and this guy's out there with me, and he's got a, 12-year-old kid, and he's going, oh yeah, and I think he needs another board. This is his big wave board, or his short. I go, how many boards he got? 3. Come on.
He's 12.
He's 12.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of it though, isn't it? That, it's part of the culture in a lot of ways. Well, it's part of the whole culture, like consumers and collecting. It's encouraged, isn't it? But again, it's that thing you're talking about, just rethink the relationship.
Yeah.
And that's
your holiday. Love your... You spoke to me about palliative care just before we started on this.
Yeah.
No one, I'm sure if you asked this guy, Akhil Gawande, was that the name?
Yeah, that's his name.
One of the studies of people in palliative care is that when they're dying, no one ever regrets having not had enough, product and consumerism.
I wish I'd bought more shit.
Yeah, or had the bigger car, or the...
Yeah.
No, what they miss is that not sitting and having conversations like this between you and me.
Yeah.
Not telling people that you love them. Not going out and going, whoa, check that for a sunset or a sunrise, or... those are the bits that we miss. Like Steve Jobs, it was very sad. Wasn't it? Whoa.
Yeah, it really was, actually. Have you read his book?
No.
I mean, that's a classic case of that, essentially.
Somebody
at the end of their life with the whole world, this is my interpretation anyway, belatedly realising what he'd kind of not seen the whole way. So my final question, which is something that I always ask people that are on the guests on Type 2, people that are listening, what would you, who are engaged and want to kind of contribute and make a change, what would you say to them? How could they do that in a positive way?
Have a bit of sheer bloody mindedness. Do make it fun, even though it's really serious. Like the last year of SAS, I had to go and give evidence at the coroner's inquest into the death of an 8-year-old girl. So at times it can be serious, but have that, we need to tell, our story needs to be attractive. So not too worthy, passionate, fun, believe that we can make that difference, and communicate it. Gather people around you, and create that kind of fizzing buzz of energy. And if someone says you can't, damn well do it.
So there you go. That was me in conversation with Chris Hines MBE. And like I said at the start, I hope you found that conversation as thought-provoking and inspirational as I did. I've got to thank Chris wholeheartedly for his time and hospitality and for the great experience, really. Hope to see you again and finish the conversation as we discussed at the time. Also like to thank my friends at Watergate Bay for their help in pulling this one together. To find out more about Chris's work, please head on over to www.agos.co, where you can find out much more about what he does. Nice one. As you probably know by now, I release new episodes of Type 2 every month or so, where they appear in my usual Looking Sideways feed. You can subscribe to that via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your usual podcast provider. If it's your first time checking out what I do, make sure you head over to my website, www.wearelookingsideways.com. You're going to find nearly 120 episodes of interviews with some of the biggest names in action sports and other related endeavours. You can sign up to my newsletter, follow me on social media, find show notes for every episode. There's a lot to get stuck into, so I hope you enjoy it if you do go and have a look. All right, thanks for listening. I'll see you next time. Nice one.